I come from a hunting family. My older brother, dad, cousins, and 3 uncles usually spend the fall hunting every weekend. Of course, I was introduced into this culture and came to love the outdoors. Growing up Hmong and both of my parents being shamans, I grew to appreciate the superstitions that had been told to me over the years of adolescence. My dad would always tell me the rules of hunting and respecting the spirits that lived there because we were only there to hunt. Over the past 15 years or so, my combined family has hunted a certain area and we knew the place like it was our own backyard. We would usually hunt small game, waterfowl, and big game there. One year, I remember that we were invited by a distant relative to a new hunting area in Rochester, Minnesota. My brother, dad, and I decided that we would try it out for Halloween weekend and see if we could get anything. I have never experienced any supernatural occurrences while hunting until this certain weekend. Thinking about what happened still scares me to this day. I was roughly only 15 years old at the time, and we got there at around 6 a.m. in Rochester. My older brother decided that he wanted to bow hunt for deer, and my dad and I were going to squirrel hunt. When we arrived, we dropped off my older brother about a mile into the forest, and my dad and I hiked up hills to find squirrels. The both of us had separate guns and understood the rules of hunting. Always keep your gun on safety, treat your gun as if it is always loaded, and whatever you do, do not point the gun at anyone. Every 10 or so minutes, I would check to see if my safety on my .22 rifle was on. Over the course of 2 hours of non-stop hiking, we haven't found a single squirrel yet. I started to get bored and decided I was just going to enjoy the view of the outdoors instead. While we kept walking, I noticed that there weren't any birds either. The forest was dead silent and there was absolutely no wind at all. I was a little shocked because this is the first time I noticed something so weird. After another 30-minute hike across a huge hill, we find a circular 2-acre area that was filled with squirrels. We were both so surprised because there were literally over 40 or so squirrels that were jumping around. We loaded our rifles and slowly approached the squirrels. They were on the ground, jumping on trees, and they were no less than 15 yards away from us. I remember walking behind my dad, crouching and being very silent because we didn't want to scare them away. All of a sudden, I felt cold chills down my spine and I felt breathing right next to my right ear. All I remember was blacking out and it felt like something was moving my body without my own will. I felt like I couldn't breathe and something was holding me down with such a strong force. It felt like something had physically stopped me from being inside of my own body. I was so scared, I prayed to my deceased grandparents to help me. Within 30 seconds or so, I regained consciousness, but I noticed that I was standing completely still in one spot, with my gun pointed directly at my father's back and my finger on the trigger. I knew at that moment that something didn't stop me physically. Something possessed me spiritually. I was so scared I dropped my gun and unloaded every bullet out of my gun. I was sweating so hard and I felt like something in that forest was staring at me the whole time. My dad kept walking forward and ended up shooting 2 squirrels. We stayed there for roughly another 30 minutes and decided to walk back to the car. I was in shock and just wanted to get out of that forest as fast as possible. I didn't want to tell my dad nor my brother because I kept lying to myself that nothing happened. We picked up my brother from his tree stand and we packed all of our stuff, and then we hiked back to the car. Near the entrance of the forest, there was a dirt road that led to the cars. While we walked back, I accidentally dropped my squirrel call and went back to pick it up. My dad and brother were probably 10 yards ahead of me. As soon as I picked it up, I heard someone scream my name. I looked in all directions and saw only my dad and brother still walking towards the car. I felt a cold shock down my spine and in the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow standing next to a tree, waving at me. I ran for my dear life. I could hear whatever was back there laughing and giggling while I sprinted down the dirt road. I later asked my dad and brother if they called my name at all, and they said that they did not. I have never told the story to my dad or my brother, and I have never returned back to that forest. It was the scariest experience in my entire life. This was in 2014 when I was 21. My brothers and I would always go fishing all night by the river and having a blast. On June 21st, 2014, that night changed us forever, and sometimes we would still talk about what happened to us. This was a fishing trip that we had planned. We were fishing for sturgeon. At this time, sturgeon would come up Sacramento River. The place we decided to fish at was a little hidden fishing spot on the Sac River located in Knight's Landing, a small little town, a pretty chill town. This spot was a sandy bank shore, and the only way to get to there, you have to go through an open field off the road and a small forest. It was about a 10-minute walk to get to the riverbank. Anyways, we all decided to go. We were a group of 4. We all planned an overnight trip and packed enough to eat and beer to just kick it off on the banks. When we got there early in the morning, we fished all day and had a blast. Everyone caught at least one fish that day. Then it started to get dark, so we set up camp and had a fire going too. The moon was out and very, very, very bright. So bright that you can see the outline of trees and whatever. We were fishing 4 hours after the dark, and my brother realized it was quiet. A little too quiet. Don't forget, at this time of the year, you would hear crickets and frogs, but the thing was, we didn't hear them at all. I thought this was weird, but we all just shook it off. It was nothing because the area we were at was sandy anyways. I happened to check the time, and it was 2:58 a.m. now. We were just fishing with the firelight very bright behind our backs. I remember talking to my brother about this girl I was talking to, when out of the blue we all heard a loud splash on the other side of the bank. We thought that was weird, and it kind of spooked us too, but again, we thought it was just sea otters because otters always make loud splashes like that anyways. About 20 minutes after that, we decided to set out bait for sturgeon and go back to our campfire. We were chilling and having a fun time talking when out of the blue, my oldest brother saw a lady in yellow drenched in water. She was walking straight up to our camp. Now at this time, all of us got extremely frightened. My older brother is a friendly guy and he invited her to our campfire. My brother was asking questions, but the woman kept her eyes on the fire and remained silent. I got a good look at her face. She was Caucasian. Her face had a ghostly look to it. She had pale white skin and had long dark hair, but they looked old and dirty. The yellow jacket that she was wearing was torn and dirty, like old clothes that had been outside for years. What was weird was that she was wearing a jacket in the middle of summer. I knew something was off, so I told them that I was going to go to the car to grab something. My younger brother and I both went back, but we weren't just walking. We were full-on sprinting. 5 minutes after we got back to our car, we saw our brothers running towards us, when all of a sudden the wind picked up like a storm, and then we heard a crazy buzzing high-pitched sound. Then off in the distance we heard her say,
"Why did you leave me?"
We all jumped into the car and took off, heading into Woodland and decided to get a hotel there. The next day, we went back to check out the spot. All of our stuff was everywhere. Some of our stuff were even in the trees. And keep in mind, they weren't just small trees. These were 50 to 60 foot tall trees. Our little campsite was an entire mess. We just grabbed everything that we could and left. On the way back home, my older brother told us something I could never imagine. He told us that after we left, the girl began to mumble words in weird languages, and then she spoke in Hmong. My brothers got up real quick and saw that her eyes were getting white and blood was dripping out from her eyes. That's when they took off. They said that she was chasing them, but she wasn't running, but gliding. They thought they were going to die. After reaching the edge of the forest, the girl stopped chasing us but was growling and screaming. This was something I would never want to experience again. Ever since that encounter, we never went back there. After digging up some information on the history of that place, I found out it was a place where they hung people and practiced witchcraft. I was 15 when this incident happened. My mother was about 6 months pregnant, and we wanted a cow to Waneng. We lived in Wasilla, Alaska, which was a rural place. This city was filled with many farms supporting wildlife. We'd buy cows, chickens, pigs, goats, anything that we needed. However, most of these farms were located in the woods, somewhere where most people were not around. As we left our home to a far location in Wasilla, we gathered everything we needed to prep. As we arrived at the location, the place was covered by woods. There was a large farm filled with animals. We got what we came for and called it a day. My mother needed to use the bathroom really bad, and it was a very long drive back. Unfortunately, there were no public bathrooms, so she just decided to go into the woods. About 2 or 3 days later, my mother started to feel pain in her stomach. She felt as if her baby was doing something. My mother started to bleed and her stomach hurted so bad, she was rushed to the hospital. As they checked on my mother, the doctors claimed that the baby was not doing well. They had to do an emergency checkup on the baby. The doctors could not find any reason as to why this was happening, because a week before, my mother was doing perfectly fine. With nowhere else to go, my father called a shaman to see what was wrong. His answer shocked us, and we'd be too late if we had never found out. The shaman told us that a spirit was trying to take over the baby. It all started when my mother decided to use the woods. She urinated at the wrong spot and at the wrong time. This caused a spirit to allow itself to attach to my mother. It followed my mother home and tried to take over the baby. The shaman did a ritual, and the baby was finally back to health. I remember that before the shaman came to visit us, I woke up in the middle of the night to see a shadow figure on top of my mother. I was too scared and didn't pay any attention to it. I regret not saying anything, and I feel ashamed. 3 months later, my mother gave birth to my sister. She is beautiful and healthy. To celebrate, we wanted to roast a pig, so we went to the same farm. Again, my mother needed to use the restroom, but she decided not to because the shaman told her that the scent could attract the same spirit. I currently work overnight at a communications company in Alaska, and at night, there aren't many of us working. On normal days, there would be about 6 to 8 people, and we are all pretty familiar with each other. Due to the nature of our jobs, taking breaks or rather just using the bathroom, there cannot be 2 of us out of the phone queues in case there is a big outage or something. One day, we were short-handed and another coworker got assigned to work with us for a week. We briefed him on the rules and made sure he was up to snuff on all of our procedures. Somehow, we got onto the topic of ghosts. Our new coworker asked, "There isn't anything else I should be worried about, right?" I replied, "Nah, man, I haven't experienced anything scary yet, and I've been working here for about a year." The both of us just laughed at my comment. A few hours go by, and I had eaten a few snacks, and we always drink a lot of water, and if you guessed it, I needed to use the restroom. I told the guys that I had to use the restroom and to not break anything, and headed to the bathroom quickly. To paint you a better picture, the bathroom is small. The first door leads to a small hallway. I'm not sure why, but once you pass the hallway, you get to the actual door to the restroom. Imagine you open the door, and in front of you, you can see 2 stalls for taking a number 2. These stalls are sideways, so you can see if there are people using the bathroom right away. To the right, there is a sink and a urinal. Every time I walk into this restroom, I do my due diligence and make a mental note if anyone is in there. This time was no different, so I did my business and proceeded to the sink to wash my hands. As I was wiping my hands dry, out of nowhere, in the moment of dead silence, I heard someone or something cough in the furthest stall away from me. And it wasn't a slight, small cough. It was a loud and scruffy one. Instantly, the hairs on my back were standing straight up. I was scared because I was certain I was the only one in there. At this point, a cold shiver traveled through my body from head to toe like a wave. Then slowly, I turned around. In this moment, I had a fight or flight feeling. I thought to myself that I should take a look under the stalls. I proceeded to lean forward and bend down, slowly tilting my head low enough so I can see if there are any feet under the stalls. Nothing. There was nobody in the stalls. At this point, a million thoughts were flooding in my mind. Should I run? Should I check the stall? My first instinct was to run, and I couldn't tell you how fast I got out of there, but it may have been a world record. Honestly, I have never moved that quickly in my life. When I got back to my seat, I explained what happened to my coworkers, who just laughed and shrugged it off as if I was just joking. To this day, there's a long-running joke about the ghost in the restroom. I currently work head of security, responsible for night operations on the graveyard shift at my facility. Keep in mind, my facility is pretty old and has quite some history behind it. This happened a while ago, but until now, I finally had the time to write it. My shift begins at midnight and ends at 8 in the morning, 5 out of 7 days, and during my shift, I am responsible for the well-being and safety of the property, residents, and staff. I pretty much control all CCTV recorded videos and audio. I verify and validate visitors, keep track of who's up and wandering at night, check doors, make schedules, handle complaints and conflicts, a little bit of internal affairs, and I escort staff to the vehicles, especially at night in West Fresno. But this job mainly does a lot of observing and reporting. It's not a bad security job for someone interested in getting their foot in the door for law enforcement. I would say a better job compared to when I worked for a small privately owned security company called Turner in Fresno, where they sent their employees to watch almond fields in the middle of the night until dawn to prevent theft. Picture acres and acres of farmland out in the countryside while driving a marked company patrol vehicle. That's another story I'll have to share later. My real story begins and started with the resident I usually see up at night. Some residents are more active than others. Some are just more tired and sleepy than others, but this one I shared a pretty close and personal relationship with. She visits me at the security desk quite often just to say hi and ask me how my day was and see how school is currently going. She would often tell me things that bothers her or how she misses her family and how no one visits her. She tells me how lonely she gets. That's why she's able to open up to me. This resident is wheelchair bound. I don't know her personal medical history, but I can tell she's diabetic. One time, she told me that she woke up from her sleep and she heard someone calling her name. When she looked around, no one was there. None of the nurses or CNAs checked up on her for the last 3 hours thinking that she was asleep. She claimed that when she woke up, she heard a man calling her name, and when she looked, she saw a man hanging from her ceiling. She then explained to me this man would always wake her up, and when she sees him, it's always only half of the body as the other half is stuck between the ceiling. After telling me all of this, she showed me a picture of her taken by a family member when they visited. As she was laying down, dozing off, the picture showed what appears to be a half body of someone. Now that you kind of have a background idea of the environment I'm in, it's pretty creepy. On this particular day, I was playing football with my little brother. Our backyard is a squarish rectangle and is covered with a wooden fence all around. I was facing the side of the street, and my little brother was facing towards the opposite of where I was at. It was during the fall, around mid-November. Around 5 p.m., the sun already set, and it was kind of dark outside. As we were throwing the football back and forth, nothing unusual happened until it hit around 5:30 to 5:35 p.m. We were out there around 4:30 to 4:45. I forgot what time exactly, but almost an hour outside of playing catch. Our fence has little gaps like any wooden fence would. At the corner to where we were, our fence ended there, and it doesn't connect to my neighbor's fence, so there was a 3 to 4 inch gap at the right corner. You could see and tell when people walk by or drive their car past because you'd see through the gaps. Around 5:30 p.m., the sun was gone and you can't see it, but you know it's still somewhere because it's not exactly pitch black. It was starting to get hard to see the football. As my little brother caught the football, out of the corner of our fence by that 3 to 4 inch gap, there was a shadow of a woman. It was entirely pitch black. Right when I threw the football, I saw her for the 2 seconds, and then she vanished. The gap turned white and empty as if nothing was ever there. I was confused because I knew I would see if someone walked by through the gaps of the fence. Right there and then, I had this creepy feeling, and it got even darker. I looked around my surroundings and had these goosebumps like something wasn't right. I told my little brother that we could play later because it was getting dark and for him to bring the football inside. I didn't say to come inside because my hairs were sticking like I just knew something was off. I didn't want to invite whatever that was in. It was my first time ever seeing anything like that. After a while, I just let it go and pretended or made an excuse that I was seeing things. Then, that night, I encountered the silhouette woman. I didn't think much, so I went to sleep. I had a dream, and it was the most realistic dream I've ever had. It was as if I existed there. In my dream, I was with my friend and his girlfriend. He was the driver, and his girl was the passenger. I was the third wheeler in the back, confused in my dream as to why everything felt so real. I looked to my right and saw this girl. She sat down in the seat next to me and said nothing at all. She had very long hair that covered her face, and I couldn't see her face. That's how much hair she had, and she was just quietly sitting and didn't move or anything. We continued driving, and my friend took us to a restaurant that was literally a scene from the movie Cabin in the Woods. The restaurant was in the middle of this creepy forest. We all sat down and ate, and I was so confused as to why everything was so real. We all had our meals and chit-chat and ate. Finally, I asked my friend, who was the girl that was in the car with us this whole ride? Then my friend said that, what girl? There wasn't any girl. I looked to my right and it was an empty seat. At that point, I was even more confused because I swore she was just there. Then Peter said that we were done eating, so we went outside. We were greeted with dead trees and little to no leaves. It was a full moon outside and very foggy and misty like a scary movie scene. The couple went ahead of me a few steps, and then all of a sudden, they just took off. When I turned and noticed, I thought they were going to ditch me. That's when I saw the girl again, right behind them, sprinting with them. I was scared of being ditched, so I ran after them. As I ran, there was nothing around me except for dead bushes and trees, almost like running through a jungle in the dark. As I got halfway, a black demon-looking hand came out of the side and stopped me in my path and pulled me back. I fell straight down and it felt like an eternal fall. The next thing you know, I woke up paralyzed like I got sat on. On top of that, I couldn't control my body and started shaking violently. I felt like I was going to die and accepted my fate. That's when I heard a sound of a horse neighing from afar. It got closer and closer as I heard his hooves approach me. Right when it got next to me, I broke out of everything and came back to life. I stopped shaking and had control of my body. I didn't tell my parents for months because it was so strange and weird, but during those months, I encountered that same silhouette woman every night ever since that dream. But that's another story to tell. I remember my dad telling me a story when I was a kid. He was back in his homeland and had gone to his family's farm to go farming. He spent the whole day there alone with only his dog to accompany him while he was working. He said he stopped to take a break and realized that it was getting too late to go back home, so he decided to sleep at the farm. He was kind of scared to sleep at the farm, but remembered that the elders always said to not walk through the woods at night. Plus, his dog had been growling at the woods as night was following. So, my dad decided to sleep at the small hut located on the farm. It was finally all dark when he started to hear noises. He got scared and decided to make his way back home. When he started walking through the woods, he said he smelled something that stank of a rotting corpse. It was so strong that it made him gag and almost vomit. His dog whimpered and ran back to the farm. My dad got scared and ran back to chase it, but when he caught up to his dog, he saw what seemed to be a dog-like creature on top of his dog, and his dog was crying so much. It looked like a humanoid dog with long spidery legs. I don't remember how much he described about it, but it was pretty creepy and he emphasized how much it stank. He got scared and ran the rest of the way home. In the morning, he made one of his friends go with him to check it out. When they got there, his dog was split open. There was blood everywhere, soaked into the dirt and grass, and what was left was bones and fur.